Hey guys, how are you today? Quick rant before we dive into today's chaos. As some of you might have noticed, YouTube's algorithm has decided I'm not special anymore. Shocking, I know. So now if you don't like, comment, or do a little backflip in the algorithm's honor, this video might just vanish into the void, never to be seen again. Seriously though, even a hi or "this is wild" in the comments helps way more than you think. It tells YouTube, hey, people actually like this channel. Maybe don't hide it from everyone. That can really help push my videos out to a wider audience, not just to my subscribers. So if you enjoy these stories and want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. Now grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the drama. You won't want to miss this one. When my ex-husband left me 5 years ago, I thought the worst part would be explaining to our then 9-year-old son why his dad wasn't coming home. I thought the hardest thing I'd ever have to do was swallow my rage and sadness and figure out how to keep life stable for a little boy who had no part in the choices that blew our family apart. But I was wrong. The real betrayal didn't come when he walked out of our marriage. It came later, years later, when I realized just how little our son actually meant to him once he had someone else to impress. My ex-husband, Mark, now 45 male, left me for his affair partner, Vanessa, 42 female, who is now his wife. The affair started at his office, a cliche really. Vanessa was a freelance consultant working on a short-term project. I suspected something was off long before I found the texts, the late nights, the extra business trips, the sudden need for space. When I finally confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just looked tired, said we grew apart, that it wasn't about me, that he wanted to be happy. I moved out a month later with our son Ethan and filed for divorce. Mark was always successful. Back then, he ran a high-performing mid-sized marketing firm. We had a nice house, 2 cars, annual vacations, private school savings for Ethan, and a joint fund we contributed to monthly for things like birthdays, tech upgrades, and whatever Ethan might need as he grew older. It was always agreed that the fund was untouchable, except for Ethan's needs. And when we divorced, the court kept that in place. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was meaningful. Ethan's safety net, something he could rely on. After the divorce, Mark married Vanessa within a year. She had a daughter from a previous relationship, Zoe, who was 8 at the time. Mark became obsessed with being the cool stepdad. I could see it in how he talked about her, how she reminded him of himself as a child, how deep she was, how her biological father was useless, how she just needed stability and a male role model. I heard it all in court when he tried to reduce his child support by claiming he was supporting 2 children now. Thankfully, the judge saw right through that. Still, I tried to keep things cordial, for Ethan's sake. But even he noticed the shift. At every pickup or drop-off, Zoe was front and center. Vanessa called all the shots. Mark became more and more distant, missed parent-teacher meetings, missed birthdays, gave excuses for everything. The only thing he never missed, posting photos of their perfect blended family on Instagram. Zoe's science fair, stepdad life, Disney Plus nights with my girls. And Ethan? He became background noise in his own father's life. Things took a turn after COVID hit. Mark's company didn't survive the lockdowns. Clients pulled out. Projects froze. By mid-2021, he'd laid off most of his staff and closed down the office. I'll admit, part of me felt bad. I knew how much that company meant to him, but empathy wore thin when he started falling behind on child support, making excuses, dodging calls. He said he was figuring things out, that he was rebuilding, that he just needed a few more months. I picked up extra shifts. I cut corners. I never told Ethan what was happening, only that sometimes people hit rough patches, and we needed to be patient. I didn't want him to hate his father. Fast forward to this year. Ethan just turned 14. He's been saving for a new gaming PC, something he's been researching for over a year. He's incredibly responsible with money. He babysits, does tutoring, gets small cash gifts for birthdays, and he had close to $2,000 saved up in the account Mark and I set up for him years ago. I'm a co-signer, but the agreement was that any withdrawals needed both parents' approval. It's been untouched all this time. Until one day, last month, Ethan checked the balance and noticed that nearly $1,800 was missing. He came to me in tears, thinking maybe it was a bank error or a scam. I logged in. The withdrawal was made online, transferred to Mark's personal account. No authorization from me, no heads up, nothing. I called Mark immediately. He didn't pick up. I texted, no response. Finally, the next morning, he called back sounding defensive from the start. I asked him why the hell he'd touched Ethan's account. He said something like, "Don't overreact. It was a temporary borrow." I was going to pay it back. Borrow for what? I demanded. He hesitated, then muttered, "Zoe's birthday." I felt like I'd been punched. Turns out, Zoe was turning 13 and had always dreamed of going to Disneyland. Mark had promised it would happen no matter what. Vanessa had been pressuring him. So instead of canceling or scaling back, he pulled money from his biological son's savings to fund a 5-day trip to Disneyland. For a child who wasn't his. For a girl he was so desperate to impress. He didn't think twice about stealing from the son he's been emotionally neglecting for years. I told him flat out he had 48 hours to return the money, or I was going to my lawyer. He told me to calm down, that I was making a big deal out of nothing, that it was just a few $100s, it wasn't, and that family shares. I filed paperwork the next day. My lawyer sent a formal letter, no reply. But here's the twist. Because Mark has been unemployed for 2 years and has no consistent income, Vanessa, his wife, is legally liable for the repayment as they filed joint finances last year. The court ordered the money repaid within 30 days, or we'd escalate it to civil theft. That's when the real fireworks started. Vanessa called me, screaming. She said I was vindictive, that I was trying to ruin their marriage, that I always hated Zoe, and that I was jealous because Ethan had a new family now. She called me a bitter ex-wife and said I was damaging the children. I stayed calm and said, "I'm protecting the only child who matters to me. The one your husband stole from." She hung up. 2 days later, Ethan gets a text from his father, accusing me of making things worse, saying he didn't mean for it to go this far, and that Vanessa is furious and threatening to divorce him, because now they have to use their rent money to pay back the savings. Now my parents are asking if I really had to go that far, that Mark is still Ethan's father, that I should have found another way, that this will leave a permanent mark. But I think the permanent mark was already made, the moment a father chose to steal from his son to play Prince Charming for someone else's daughter. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for going to my lawyer after my ex-husband stole our son's savings to take his stepdaughter to Disneyland, even though now his wife is threatening to leave him over the repayment order? Not the a-hole. I'm so furious on OP's and her son's behalf. The fact that this man, and I use that term loosely, could steal nearly $1,800 from his own child to play Disneyland Daddy for his stepdaughter is absolutely disgusting. He didn't just borrow the money. He took it without permission, knowing full well what that account was for. This wasn't some split-second mistake. He thought it through, clicked the buttons, and chose Zoe's birthday fantasy over his son's trust and savings. And what kills me most? He didn't even apologize to Ethan. He blamed OP for the fallout. That's not a father. That's a coward hiding behind Instagram photos of blended family bliss, while emotionally abandoning the son he helped create. Good for OP for taking legal action. He may not care about Ethan's future, but OP clearly does, and she is doing an incredible job. And now let's hear community's opinion. Vanessa screaming that you're ruining her marriage is honestly the most hilarious part of this whole tragic situation. Girl, your husband committed actual theft from his own child, and you're mad at the mother for demanding it be returned. Maybe instead of yelling at the ex-wife, she should ask herself what kind of man prioritizes Disneyland for a stepchild over the basic financial boundaries in place for his own son. And let's not pretend this was a misunderstanding. This was entitlement. Plain and simple, Mark has spent years trying to be Dad of the Year to a girl who probably barely knows him, while treating his actual son like a background character. And now that it's blowing up in their faces, they're playing the victim, not the a-hole. You didn't ruin anything. Their house of lies and favoritism is just finally collapsing on its own. Honestly, everyone keeps talking about Mark and Vanessa, but can we talk about Ethan for a second? That poor boy saved his money like a responsible young man, and then one day, it just vanished. Not because of a scammer or a bank error, but because his own father stole it. Imagine being 14 and realizing that the man you looked up to values looking good in front of his new family more than your hard-earned dreams. That kind of emotional wound cuts deep and stays with you. And then to top it off, your dad texts you not to apologize, but to guilt you because his wife is mad. Disgusting. You're not the AH. You're the shield between your son and a manipulative man who treats him like an afterthought. Don't second-guess yourself for 1 second. You did what any good mother would do, and you're the only one in Ethan's life who's truly protecting him. I have 2 daughters. My stepdaughter is 19 and my bio daughter is 17. I married my now wife, stepdaughter's bio mom, 7 years ago. My daughters don't have the best relationship. The issue was mostly my own daughter wanting her mom and I to get back together, and her lashing and acting out when younger. Lots of family therapy later, and they have a polite and civil relationship, but it is kind of a no-love lost thing. My own individual relationships with both girls is strong. My stepdaughter does call me dad, and as far as we are both concerned, we are family. There has recently been an issue that has caused contention within my bio daughter, though. My mother passed away unexpectedly. There was a will, but it was unfortunately very much in need of an update. My mom had wanted all her grandkids to be considered, but there have been additions to the extended family, and the will wasn't updated to include them before my mother passed. My sister and I decided that fulfilling the spirit of the will was more important than the letter of it. So, after all the named parties in the will were bequeathed with what was spelled out, instead of dividing the remainder of everything evenly, we made sure that those of us with kids not named in the will got more, so we could pass it forward to them. This means I inherited part of my mother's jewelry collection. She had several valuable collections, pieces dating back to the late 1800s and early 1900s. Vintage Tiffany & Company items. Some of the pieces were valued into 5 figures. My bio daughter was left a significant cash sum from my mother, which she will get when she turns 18. I divided the jewelry up between my daughters, so that my stepdaughter's share's value was equivalent to what my daughter is receiving in cash. My daughter is absolutely livid about this. She feels that as family heirlooms, the more valuable pieces are her birthright. She says it isn't fair that they are going to someone not related to my mother, and has been saying that if I don't give her some of those pieces, that as soon as she turns 18, she is taking her money and will never speak to me again. Am I the a-hole for how I distributed everything? You're the a-hole due to how you split, and the fact your mother had 7 years to include your stepdaughter and didn't. You should have considered that. I understand wanting to include your stepdaughter, but giving her the lion's share of the jewelry is very unfair. It was wrong to match your daughter's cash amount. You should have split the jewelry 50-50, or given stepdaughter a few token pieces. You're the a-hole. You and your sister decided to override a legal document that spelled out your mother's final wishes. You said it hadn't been updated to add stepchildren and step-grandchildren. She could have updated her will in the many years since the step-grandchildren have come into the family, if she had wanted to. She didn't. You disregarded your mother's last wishes and replaced it with your own. Your stepdaughter undoubtedly has a bio family who may provide for her later. Are you going to force her to give half of that to your daughter who has no relationship? When you die, you can have a will deciding how you want your estate divided. You don't have a moral or legal right to override your mother's last will. Your daughter is right. This is probably not the first time you have shown favor to your stepdaughter over your bio daughter. You will be fortunate if you don't lose your relationship with your daughter over this. You're the a-hole. Reason 1. You and your sister don't get to do an interpretive dance with your mother's will. The laws are pretty clear on this. If you wanted to give your stepdaughter a fair share, you had 2 options. Either it comes out of your portion of the settlement, or you balance it out with your own estate planning. Reason 2. If your daughter only got money and you gave the family heirloom pieces to your stepdaughter, then intentional or not, you created a clear message to your daughter that she is not part of family history. Edit. This was all checked by our family attorney. My daughter cannot challenge the will and reasonably expect to win. The will was followed to a T. The grandkids in the will were all left $50,000 cash. The rest of the estate was supposed to be divided evenly between my siblings and I. After the will was executed, my siblings who don't have kids, or who only had kids named in the will, then gifted some of their funds or items to those of us who had kids that were not in the will. Will was followed. Two of my sisters gave me their rightful share of the jewelry after the estate was settled. That was the agreement my siblings and I had, because we know our mom would have wanted things fair. Edit 2. My daughter did receive some jewelry. She got the one piece she specifically asked for, one of the only pieces my mom actually wore, and a few others as well. My stepdaughter just received the valuable pieces, which were not sentimental. My mother never wore them. They were collector's pieces only. My stepdaughter and mother had a great relationship and were active in each other's lives. My 35 female, husband of 9 years, just passed away from a pulmonary embolism. Besides me, he leaves behind our 8-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter. My late husband was a doctor who had a very popular practice in our town. We live in a small town in the Great Plains area, notorious for having few options for good quality health care because of a provider shortage. After his death, we received an outpouring of condolences from the community. I was receiving dozens upon dozens of messages from people who wanted to talk about the time he treated them or a family member, and ended up releasing them from their payment plans when they encountered financial hardship. There were also letters thanking me and my husband for those times we postponed our vacations so he could rush to a patient's side and be there for them. His funeral was today, and I was home inviting his patients and friends, asking them if they wanted to speak, and preparing my own eulogy. When my husband died, my 13-year-old stepdaughter was with us, but right afterwards, she went to her mother's, 53 female house. My son and daughter obviously still live with me, and because we are under the same roof, I was able to incorporate them into my speech where they'd stand with me, and at the end, they could both say how much their dad meant to them, what they loved to do with him, their fondest memories, how they'd miss him. My stepdaughter wasn't in the house when any of this was going on. However, after her mom called me, I told them the date and the time of the funeral, and invited both of them. Her mom called me yesterday morning to tell me that my stepdaughter had a 2-minute speech prepared for her dad, and emailed me the entire speech. I was very shocked, because it seemed my stepdaughter just expected to be able to speak at the funeral, and not tell me this during the 7+ days prior. Second, her speech was rather long, and had a lot of things that my kids were going to be saying. When her mom suggested that she just stand with her half-siblings and add in the parts that would not be a repeat, I refused, because my son is new to speeches, and changing things up was probably going to confuse him. I told my stepdaughter's mom that she could be there to grieve her dad, but that she could not speak. She got mad and said I was hard to reach, and that nothing in her speech was inappropriate, and that 2 minutes was not too long, even if the other speakers would be shorter. I agree that I'm sure her speech would have been lovely, but it was too late, and I couldn't risk this situation throwing the event off and giving my kids confusion since we rehearsed our eulogy. So the funeral was today, and my stepdaughter did not speak, but even after I allowed her to be among us and receive condolences from the line of friends and family, my parents are calling me an a-hole, and my stepdaughter's mom glared at me on the way out. Am I the a-hole? You're the a-hole. Your stepdaughter lost her father at the age of 13 and wants 120 seconds to express to everyone how much she loves and admires him, and you said no. I try to cut grieving people a lot of slack, but this is absolutely horrible, and I really hope someday you give her the apology she deserves. You're the a-hole, like majorly. It may have been your husband, but it was her father. I understand you're grieving, but so is she. She is also only 13, while you are a whole grown adult. You may not want to hear this, but you can get a new husband. That was her one and only dad. She will not get a new one. You have likely created resentment between her and her half-siblings that will be difficult for them to work through later in life. You have also likely made her feel even more alone on a day that was already going to be hard on her. She's going to remember the way you treated her on this very traumatizing day for the rest of her life. Just seriously, how can you think you're in the right? Edited to add, you allowed her to receive condolences? Like she doesn't have a right to them? It's like you think you own the grief related to your husband's passing. Huge, you're the a-hole. I notice in the beginning you talk about him leaving behind, you and y'all's kids, but don't mention stepdaughter at all. She was way more entitled to having a say with this funeral than you. I've been married to my husband for 14 years now. When we met, he had 3 children from a previous marriage. They were around 8, 11, and 15. I had a 2-year-old from a previous marriage as well. Together, we have a 12-year-old son. We have all aged quite a bit, and the oldest of his children is 28. She's married and has 4 children ranging in age from 8 to 2. We don't see her very much except on holidays. His children were all raised by his mother. He had them young, so they were more bonded to his parents. My daughter is now 16. I coupon a lot and usually get a good deal on makeup. I give a lot of it to my daughter and also get her hair and nails fixed once a month. It's only about $100 a month to do it. On Thanksgiving, my stepdaughter was sitting there and her roots were showing badly, and her nails don't look like they have been messed with for years. She also doesn't wear any makeup at all. So I told her that she could buy some of the makeup that I've collected and that she would look better. She told me she was fine with how she looked now. I told her it was just fine for her to be happy with it, but her husband would probably like for her to look more than just average. She got offended by this and told me that if her husband didn't like the way she looked, that he could leave and that she wasn't changing anything. Her husband just sat there, and I noticed he whispered something to her, and immediately after, they said they had to go because one of the kids was having an allergic reaction to the eggs that he was fed. He did look a little blotchy, but I figured they were leaving because of me, so I told them that they didn't need to leave on my account. This further angered her, and she told me that not everything is about me. Her dad jumped in on it and said that I was just trying to help because my daughter was so beautiful and she kept herself up every month, and that I was just trying to be nice. Her and her father then got into an argument, so they all left. Since then, some extended family members have brought themselves into it because my stepdaughter has painted me to be an evil villain. Am I the a-hole? You're the a-hole. You told her she looked average and tried to sell her makeup, that you've collected by couponing. You tried to profit off your stepdaughter by trying to damage her self-esteem, and you failed. Also, it looks like you fed your grandson something he's allergic to. You look like crap. Here, I'll sell you some makeup so you can cover up your flaws that I'm pointing out to you. Oh, you don't want to wear makeup? Well, I'm sure your husband would like it if you were less ugly. You're the a-hole. I don't think she has to paint you as the evil villain when you play the role so willingly. Comparing a 16-year-old to a 28-year-old is crazy. Also, giving your grandchild something you know they're allergic to and then saying it's not a big deal is very concerning. You're the a-hole. I, 35 female, have been married for 7 years to my husband, 45 male, who is a single father to my stepdaughter, Lucy, 15 female. Also, I have a son from a previous relationship, Toby, 10 male. In these 7 years, Lucy never recognized us as family, and when she introduces us, we are Dad's wife and Dad's wife's son. Birthdays are very important to me. Ever since Toby was born, I've thrown giant birthday parties for him. That didn't change after I married my husband, and I thought about doing it for Lucy as well, but she refused. She refuses every year, and everything related to her birthday is banned from the house. Since she is turning 15 this year, I decided to throw her a surprise party. We organized it with Toby, invitations to her classmates, family, and close friends, games, karaoke, catering, and decorations. Not even my husband knew. I took the day off from work and Toby skipped school to fix everything. At night, my husband and Lucy arrived. They have dinner alone for her birthday. And we yelled, "Surprise!" And they didn't look happy, but I assumed it was because of the surprise. My husband didn't say anything to me, and Lucy disappeared almost immediately. I assumed to go talk to her friends. The party was amazing. Everyone had fun. The games were a hit, and overall, I had a great time. When bringing the cake to sing happy birthday, I called for Lucy, but she wasn't in the party. We looked for her around the house, but she wasn't there, and neither was my husband. After half an hour of trying to call them both on their cell phones, the mood got ruined and everyone left. The two returned after midnight and didn't feel guilty about leaving. I immediately asked them why they left. Lucy didn't say anything and went to her bedroom, and my husband told me to calm down. He explained that Lucy wasn't feeling well, so they went to the beach. I scolded him for not telling me, but he just shrugged and said, "You were too busy enjoying the party to notice," and went to sleep. I don't understand why they both disrespected me like that. I invested a lot of time and money in the party, and they haven't even apologized for leaving. It's been 3 days, and the two act as if nothing happened. When I try to talk about it, Lucy looks at me like I'm crazy, and my husband doesn't call her out on it. I'm tired of her indifference. I threatened my husband to take Toby and leave if they didn't open up about it, but he, surprise, shrugged and told me to calm down. I love them both, but this party disaster has made me believe it's not reciprocated, and I'm seriously considering getting a divorce. You are totally in the wrong here. You knew she only wanted to celebrate with her dad. You may want to see her as family, but she doesn't see you as family, and you can't force that on someone. You should really apologize to her. Also, you did this for you, not for her. OP, you threw the party for yourself, not your stepdaughter. She is not obligated to enjoy the party just because you went to all the effort of arranging it. Apologize, genuinely, and admit you made a massive mistake by not telling your husband of your plans. He would have told you it wouldn't be appreciated. Heck, I could see that from your first paragraph. You had a great time, and so did the guests. Lucy also had a good time at the beach with her dad. You were so wrapped up in your own pleasure, you didn't even notice she was there. Now, start to pay attention to where else you stomp over Lucy's boundaries, and your relationship may start to recover. Or maybe it's the last straw for your husband too. They didn't disrespect you. You knew your stepdaughter didn't like birthday parties, and you made her one knowing that. Not only that, but I believe you did it for yourself, because if you had done it for her, you would have noticed that she wasn't around during the party. Say you were sorry, that you love her, and will respect her boundaries, and keep the door open if she wants a relationship with you. I, 55 male, started dating my girlfriend, now wife Alyssa, 26 female, about a year and a half ago. We got married only a few months after dating. I know some may look strangely at the age gap between us, but she is a very mature young woman, and for me personally, age doesn't mean a thing when it comes to love. She cooks me dinner, cleans my house, gives me back massages. She's the nicest woman I've ever met since my late wife passed a couple years ago. When I first introduced my wife to my daughters Jenna, who was 20, and Alyssa, 13, I could see the shock in their faces. I wasn't surprised they were shocked. I expected it. But I expected them to at least show common courtesy to her as a guest. But Jenna in particular was being very rude. She ignored Alyssa when she was trying to spark a conversation with her. She gave her dirty looks and just made her feel unwelcome. It only got worse from there. She's called my wife a gold digger, a W multiple times, and when I told her we were getting married, she said she hopes she takes every last penny from me. Jenna never used to be this way. She used to be a sweet girl. My other daughter Alyssa's birthday party was a few days ago, and when Jenna arrived, she didn't bother greeting my wife and completely ignored her. I was fed up and told Jenna we needed to have a talk one-on-one outside, in which I told her she needs to start showing some respect to her stepmother, that I didn't know or care what her issue was with her. Whatever it is or was, she needs to drop it. Otherwise, she shouldn't bother coming to our house anymore. Jenna started crying and called me an a-hole for putting my wife before her. She told me she's never coming back to our house again, and I haven't heard from her since. After a few days of reflection, I feel I may have been too harsh with Jenna, but at the same time, I let her get away with being rude to my wife for too long. Was I wrong for going off on my daughter and giving her an ultimatum? You're the a-hole. What was the gap between your wife dying and your dating? Also, why is getting your end wet by a woman who was born when you were 29 more important than your children? You're a terrible father. So, let me get this straight. You speed dated a woman half your age and who is very close in age to your daughter. Then, you want your new wife to mother your daughter, who is more of her sister in age, experience, and wisdom, while your daughter is being forced to submit to this unquestioningly. Where are you not an a-hole in this scenario? The person in this equation who needs to be showing anyone respect is you towards your daughter. She has legitimate concerns, yet instead of addressing them, you went full-on a-hole. Fix this. You're the a-hole. A 30-year age gap is never acceptable, especially when the older man decides to be involved with a woman not much older than his own children and expects the kids to treat the new wife like their mother. New wife is your daughter's peer, not her stepmom. You're the a-hole.